It is 1958. The sun has just dipped below the horizon of a sleeping American suburb. But for thousands of families, the night is only just beginning. As you drive down a two-lane blacktop, a towering wall of white wood emerges from the darkness like a ghost. This wasn't just a screen. It was a 100-foot-tall invitation to a world where the rules of the formal city didn't apply. In the mid-century, the drive-in was the ultimate American sanctuary. It was a place where you could smoke, talk, and laugh without a single shush from a stranger in a dark theater. It was, quite literally, a living room on wheels. For the price of a few coins, the dashboard of your Buick became a private balcony, and the windshield became a portal to Hollywood. But there was a secret to these neon cathedrals, a reason why they became the most profitable real estate in the country, and a haunting reason why, almost overnight, they began to vanish from the landscape, leaving behind nothing but rusted poles and weed-choked lots. Before we pull into our row and settle in, I have a question for those of you who were there. Do you remember the specific, warm weight of that heavy metal speaker hanging on your window? If that memory just flashed in your mind, hit the like button. It helps our vintage community grow and tells the algorithm that these stories still matter. Tonight, we aren't just looking at old movies. We are stepping back onto the gravel lots of a lost era to find out what really happened under the flicker of the midnight projector. We are going to explore the rituals, the hidden economies, and the strange social freedoms that could only exist in the glow of a Cadillac's headlights. But to understand the magic, we first have to look at the strange, almost alien architecture of these places, and the one invisible design flaw that nearly destroyed the entire industry before the first popcorn kernel was ever popped. To the casual observer driving past on the highway, a drive-in looked like a simple parking lot. But for the engineers of the 1950s, these were precision-engineered machines designed for a very specific type of American worship. The architecture of the drive-in wasn't accidental. It was a response to a problem that the traditional movie palace could never solve: the sheer size and weight of the American automobile. The first thing you'd notice upon entering wasn't the screen, but the ground beneath your tires. The lot was a series of man-made waves, carefully graded dirt or gravel ramps known as humps. These weren't just for drainage. They were calculated to tilt the front of your car upward at a precise angle, ensuring that every person, from the driver to the children huddled in the back seat, had a clear line of sight to the towering screen. Without these ramps, the drive-in would have been nothing more than a view of the chrome bumper in front of you. Then there was the screen itself, often standing over 7 stories tall. These massive structures had to withstand gale-force winds and the relentless summer heat. Some were backed by intricate neon murals, turning the back of the theater into a glowing landmark that could be seen for miles, acting as a lighthouse for weary travelers and local teenagers alike. But the most iconic piece of architecture was the speaker pole. Thousands of silver stalks rising from the gravel, each carrying the heavy gray metal boxes that would provide the night's soundtrack. These poles were the nervous system of the theater, wired through miles of underground trenches. Yet, for all this incredible engineering, the owners quickly realized that the perfect view and the perfect sound weren't enough to stay in business. In fact, if they relied only on ticket sales, every drive-in in America would have gone bankrupt within a year. To survive, they had to invent a secondary high-speed ritual, one that took place in the glowing heart of the lot during the most stressful 10 minutes of the night. By the mid-1950s, the drive-in had developed a strange dual identity that no other American institution could claim. To the suburban father, it was a financial godsend. In a traditional indoor theater, a family of 5 was a logistical nightmare. You had to pay for a babysitter, dress the children in their Sunday best, and spend the entire film terrified that a crying toddler would get you kicked out. But at the drive-in, the kids could wear their pajamas. They could roughhouse in the back of the station wagon or fall asleep halfway through the double feature. It was the only place in America where family time and Hollywood glamour didn't at all conflict. For the parents, the car was a soundproof bubble of peace, a rare moment of relaxation in the hectic post-war climb. However, once the clock struck 9 p.m. and the younger children were fast asleep, the atmosphere of the lot shifted. As the family films ended and the B-movie creature features began, the drive-in transformed into what concerned headlines of the day called the passion pit. For the American teenager, the automobile was the first taste of true, unsupervised sovereignty. In an era of strict social codes and watchful eyes, the dark corners of the back row offered a level of privacy that was impossible to find at home. It was a rite of passage, a place where first dates were navigated under the flickering light of a Godzilla movie or a Western. The drive-in became the social headquarters of a new generation, a place where the generation gap was physically mapped out, car by car, from the front row to the back. This social freedom was the draw, but it created a massive problem for the owners. With cars full of teenagers who had more hormones than money, and families who brought their own sandwiches, the theater was barely breaking even. They needed a way to force the money out of the cars and into the cash registers. And to do it, they turned to a colorful, hypnotic form of intermission magic that changed the way Americans ate forever. If the screen was the soul of the drive-in, the snack bar was its beating heart and its financial life support. Behind the scenes, the owners knew a harsh truth. After the film distributors took their cut, there was almost no profit left in the ticket stub. The survival of the entire neon cathedral depended on one thing: getting you to open your car door and walk toward the glowing building in the center of the lot. This gave birth to one of the most iconic pieces of film history, the intermission trailer. You remember them: the dancing hot dogs, the animated popcorn boxes, and the ticking clock that counted down the seconds until the feature started. These weren't just cute cartoons. They were high-pressure sales tactics. They utilized bright colors and rhythmic music to trigger a sensory hunger that only a greasy paper bag of fries could satisfy. The snack bar itself was a marvel of mid-century efficiency. It was often the first place many Americans experienced fast food logic before the golden arches of McDonald's dominated the landscape. You would stand in long, buzzing lines, surrounded by the smell of burnt sugar and deep fryer oil, clutching your coins. A burger for 20 cents, a soda for 10, and the legendary family tub of popcorn. But the economic genius went deeper. The snacks were intentionally salted to perfection to ensure that by the time you reached the middle of the second film, you were back in line for another round of drinks. This secondary economy was so successful that by 1960, many theaters were making 70% of their total profit in just 15 minutes of intermission. For a decade, it seemed like this money-making machine would never stop. The lots were full, the projectors were hot, and the snacks were selling by the ton. But as the 1960s drew to a close, a series of invisible enemies began to gather at the edge of the cornfields. It wasn't just a change in taste, it was a fundamental shift in the American way of life that would turn these multi-million-dollar landmarks into ghost towns. The decline of the drive-in didn't happen with a bang. It happened with a slow, agonizing fade. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, the neon cathedrals were facing a pincer movement of technology and economics. The first blow came from inside the American home. The rise of color television and eventually the VCR meant that the private sanctuary of the car was no longer special. Why pack up the station wagon and fight mosquitoes when you could watch a movie in your pajamas on a sofa? But the true killer wasn't the TV. It was the land itself. When most drive-ins were built, they were on the edge of town, where land was cheap and the air was clear. But as the American suburbs expanded, those cornfields turned into prime real estate. Suddenly, a 20-acre lot that only made money 4 hours a night was worth millions to developers who wanted to build shopping malls or apartment complexes. The property taxes alone began to exceed the profit from all those dancing hot dogs and popcorn tubs. There was also the daylight savings factor. In 1966, the Uniform Time Act made daylight savings time permanent across most of the U.S. This meant that during the peak summer months, it didn't get dark enough to start a movie until 9:30 or 10 p.m. For a family with young children, a double feature that ended at 2 a.m. was no longer a fun night out. It was an exhausting ordeal. One by one, the towering screens began to peel. The neon tubes flickered out, and the humps in the gravel were leveled by bulldozers. The sanctuaries were being paved over, leaving behind only the rusted, skeletal remains of the speaker poles. By the time the 1990s arrived, the drive-in had been relegated to the status of a museum piece or a haunting ruin. But as we look back from the digital isolation of 2026, we have to ask ourselves, what did we actually lose when the last projector cooled down? Because the answer isn't just about movies. It's about a specific type of American freedom that has never been replaced. As we look back through the rearview mirror of history, it's easy to dismiss the drive-in as a mere novelty, a quirky relic of a time before high-definition streams and pocket-sized screens. But if we sit quietly in the silence of those abandoned lots, we realize that the neon cathedral provided something our modern world lacks, a shared experience that didn't demand we give up our privacy. The drive-in was the only place in the American landscape where you could be part of a massive 1,000-person crowd while still being tucked safely inside your own family bubble. It was a third place that moved with you. When the last screen was torn down to make room for a climate-controlled multiplex or a retail giant, we didn't just lose a place to watch film. We lost the ritual of the journey. We lost the humid summer breeze, the muffled chatter of a neighboring car, and the simple magic of watching a story unfold under a canopy of real stars. Today, we watch movies in isolation, often on devices that fit in the palm of our hand. We have more content than ever, yet we've never felt more disconnected from the event of storytelling. The drive-in reminds us that once, not so long ago, a movie was an odyssey. It was a reason to gather the people you loved, pack a thermos, and head out into the dark to find a tower of light in a field. Before we head back to the present day, I want to hear from you. If you could go back to that gravel lot for just one night, just one double feature, who would be in the car with you, and what movie would be playing on that giant white screen? Share your memories in the comments below. Your stories are the bricks that keep this vintage American life standing. The projectors have long since cooled, and the neon has gone dark, but the glow of those nights stays with us. Thank you for traveling through time with me tonight. Until the next sunset, keep the memories alive.